my name is Lucy from Made by Lucy. Welcome to my video tutorial. Today I'm showing you how to make these really sweet little Easter Bunny drawstring bags. Lucy, and welcome today to my video tutorial where I'm showing you how to make this super cute little drawstring bunny gift bag. I made lots of these last Easter with my sewing ladies in workshops here, and they were super popular, so I thought I would come on and show you guys how to make them on my YouTube channel and my Facebook group. So here's what you're going to need to make your bunny gift bag. First of all, you're going to need to pick some fabrics. Now it's really good to have a light coloured fabric for the actual bag itself, because we're going to embroider a face onto the bag and we want that to really stand out so we can see it clearly. This particular bag I used a linen for, but today I've decided to go for a Cotton Calico fabric because it's much more dense, and I'm hoping that will help the ears stand upright slightly more. And it's a little bit stronger than the linen, to be fair, so it's more hard wearing. So I've chose that. So that's just a natural coloured, a cream coloured Cotton Calico fabric from my local fabric store. And then you want to choose a really gorgeous inner. So depending on who you're going to give your bag to will determine what lining you might decide on. So if it's a little boy, for instance, you might choose sort of a more male themed fabric. So maybe little cars or stars in there or stripes. And this one I've chose a gorgeous floral fabric for myself. And today I've chosen a lovely cotton out of my stash. This lovely peachy sort of pink colour with little blue flowers on. It's what I'm going to use for my lining for my bunny bag, and also I'm going to use for my ears as well. And I'm going to turn my ears around this time so that the pretty floral is facing outwards towards the face there. So I'm going to show you how to do that on this bag I'm making today. You also then need your drawstring. So I've just chose a pink ribbon, exactly the same as my existing for my drawstring. And you're going to need some embroidery thread to do your face here. So again, I'm just choosing a pink and a black to do that face, and a little hand needle. And then you also need to download and print off my pattern pieces to follow by. Really, really simple. We're just going to have a bag piece here, which we put our face onto, and our little ears. And you need to cut 2 of these from your outside fabric and 2 from your lining. And the same with the ears, 2 from your outside fabric and 2 from your lining. You don't need to cut any seam allowances on top of these sizings, it's all included. So you're also going to need your scissors, some tailor's chalk to draw your face on, and some pins as well. So let's get started. So first of all, I'm going to cut my pieces of fabric out. So plain and simply, I'm just going to get my pattern pieces and my fabrics and pin them down and cut them round. So as you can see, I'm laying my pattern onto my fabric here, and I'm just going to pin this onto that chosen fabric. This is my outside fabric, my calico. When you cut your fabric, you can choose to use your scissors, or you might want to use a rotary cutter for this project as well. Whatever works best for you. So that's 2 of my little face, the little bag pieces done of the calico. I've got a little spare bit here that I'm going to cut one of my ears from, so I don't need to waste my fabric. So I'm just going to lay that on top of a piece here and grab my ear template. So again, popping a pin on there and cutting that out. There we go. So I've now got 2 ears with my chosen outside fabric, my face fabric I like to call it, on my bag. So I've got 2 of those cut. and 2 of the ears. I'm going to do exactly the same now with my pattern pieces, but on my floral fabric, and that's going to be my lining and the insides of my ears. So again, finding the best use of my fabric, so not to waste it. And if you've got a fabric that you need to be the right way up, just consider this now. So this is the top of my pattern piece here. So your fabric need to be facing up the right way when you're looking at it. And I'm just going to pin my ear on as well, in fact. So it's good if you've got a nice straight edge to your fabric already to lay your pattern piece along that straight edge. It saves you cutting one side at least. And then just my ears. And use as many pins as you need to hold your pattern and your fabric nice and flat and straight to cut it round. There we go. So 2 ears cut from my pretty floral fabric. They're going to go with my 2 plain ears, and then 2 faces or bag parts cut from my pretty floral fabric as well, and they're going to go with my other 2 calico pieces of fabric. Now to step 2. Okay, so next what we're going to do is we're going to transfer the pattern of our face onto one of the front, the front piece of fabric that we're going to use in the front of our bag. So you need to get your pattern piece so that you can see your face, and you need to draw that on with black pen or something dark enough that you're going to see it through your piece of fabric here. So lay your piece of fabric on top. A top tip for this, if you hold it up to a window, that will shine the light from behind your pattern and you should be able to see the face more clearly. You then want to transfer your face onto that front piece of fabric with your tailor's chalk so that you can see it clearly. And then we're going to hand embroider that face onto here. There's various ways that you can hand embroider your face on. You may have a technique that you want to use, but quite simply what I've done with mine to make it nice and easy is with the eyes, I've just done a few stitches, running stitches in one place, and with the nose I've just gone from the top across and then gradually moved in like a funnel and then done a running stitch for the mouth. But you find what works for you, and this is the next stage of our bag. Okay, so next we're going to sew on our face. We're going to embroider our face onto the front of our bag here. So I've got my design that I've drawn on with my tailor's chalk or your pencil, up to you. And I'm going to be using embroidery thread to do this. So I've got a black for the eyes and I've got a pink that I'm going to use for the nose and the mouth section. You also want to have a hand sewing needle, and you just need to be aware that you need a needle that's got a big enough eye in there to fit your embroidery thread through because it's quite thick. So I've threaded the black through here. I'm going to start with my eyes. I'm just going to tie a knot in the end, just 1 or 2 knot, and you want to start from the reverse of your bag so you can't see that knot, it stays underneath. And you just want to push your pencil up, your needle up, where your eye is, or your mark is that you've made. And for the eye, all I'm going to do is just a few little stitches, really, really small, quite close together there, just to make like a little dot. You can do this any way you like. If you've got a specific way that you like to embroider, you can use those techniques that you've learnt yourself. But for ease and for people that don't have any embroidery knowledge, you can also just do some little running stitches all in one spot to make that eye shape. So I'm just doing 3 little stitches almost all on top of each other, and that just gives me that nice little dot that I'm going to use my eyes. There's one. Once I've done that first one, I'm then going to tie the back off. I do not want to then go over to the other eye here, because my thread will run across the back of my bag, and you will see that on the front when your bag is in use. So we want to tie a knot there. So just spin the thread round itself to make a knot, put your needle through, and then if you get your needle and place that down on your fabric where your thread is coming through, and pull your thread, the knot will go down the needle right down to where your thread is coming through the fabric. And again, and then trim that off. So trim off the loose threads there, and then I'm going to do the same with the other side for you. So I'm going to tie a knot in the end of my embroidery thread, and you want to have, you know, a long enough amount that you're not going to be struggling to get your needle through. I'm going to find my other eye position here, and then again just 3 little stitches all on a similar spot to make that little eye shape. And you could do any face you like. You don't have to stick with the design that's on the pattern piece that I have here for you guys. You can have little eyelashes on your eyes, you can have little sleepy eyes. It's entirely up to you. So get creative. If you want to change up what your face looks like, entirely up to you. And if you do, I'd love to see, so feel free to share your pictures of your bunny bags, either in my Facebook group, that's Lucy's Social Sewing Community group, or on my YouTube channel. There's my other little eye there. So super simple to do. And I'm just going to tie a knot in the back there again. So spinning my thread through to make a knot shape, popping my needle down when my thread's coming through my fabric and pulling, and that just pops the knot right down to the base of my fabric. And then the second one should follow suit. And then I'm going to do my pink embroidery thread now for my nose and mouth. So embroidery thread you could pick up online, many places online, but you can also get it from most fabric stores as well. Or if you've got a craft store near you, if you've got a hobby craft or a range, they will also do embroidery threads as well. So it's quite good to get some typical colours you might like to use in the future and have a little stash at home. So this is the pink now. So again, I'm just going to tie a knot in the bottom. I've got a long enough length there to make sure I don't run out when I'm doing my little face. So I've got a good sort of ½ metre length of embroidery thread in my needle there. And I've only threaded it through once, so it's a single length with a knot in the end. And there's the other half there. So again, we're just going to follow our face now. So I'm going to start at the top of the nose triangle in one of the corners, and really simply I'm going to go from corner to corner or side to side. So from that corner to this corner, and then go back to the other side again, so left to right, and just following that line that I've drawn using my template. You want to do your stitches fairly close together so that the nose is nice and tight together. And just keep going down to make that little funnel shape, that triangle shape. Gradually coming in. Going to move that thread away from the bottom.
And then coming down to the bottom of the point here, just keep going to get right down to the bottom where your mouth line is then going to come down. There we go.
So then when I'm at the bottom here, I want to then start going down, following that line down, and I'm going to do a back stitch when I do this. So to do a back stitch, you come up in front of your fabric with a little gap away from your last stitch. You pull your needle up through, and then you put your needle back to the end of the last stitch, and that causes a back stitch. Oops. And then again, you bring your needle up in front, so you've got a gap there between your stitching. and then you put it back down at the end of the last stitch to close the stitching line up. And you want to do that all the way down. Trying to keep your stitches fairly even in size. And then when I get to the mouth section, I'm going to do it slightly different on this one side. I'm not going to do a back stitch. So I'm going to do a running stitch on here, leaving a little gap in between each of my stitches. So there's the bottom of my nose coming down here. I'm then going to bring my needle up, leaving space for a stitch between the end there and the new stitch. But I'm not going to go back on my stitch, I'm just going to go forward. So making a little stitch here and then bringing it back up with a stitch gap in between again. So this is just a little running stitch to the end of my mouth section, like so. And then I'm going to come back on myself. So then I'm going to come back to the end of my last stitch and I'm going to fill up those stitch gaps that I've got. So running stitch back the other way, filling up those gaps. And that will take me back to that centre mark, ready to do the other side. Okay, and then on this side we can do the back stitch because we don't need to get back to that middle point. So we bring the thread up with a gap away from the last stitch point and then go back on ourselves to fill that gap up. Bring our needle up again, a stitch length away, and then bring it back on itself to the end of the last stitch to fill the gap up, doing a back stitch all the way to the end of the mouth there. Last stitch. And then that's our nose and our mouth. So again, we're now going to knot our threads on the reverse. There we go. So I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to twist the thread around itself to make a knot, put the needle up through, put the needle back down on the fabric where the thread is coming up through the fabric and pull, and that will make the knot go right down to the base there. And same again. So again, you can put your needle down, pull, and that takes the knot right down to the base. And then I'm going to trim off this excess right the way down, move those needles out the way. And then we have our lovely face now embroidered onto the front of our bunny bag. And that's all we need to do for that part. And then we're ready to start putting it all together. Okay, so we've finished our little face now. We've got our little embroidered face on there. Now we want to start lining all our fabrics together to sew and start bringing our bag together. So first of all, we want to pair up our little ears. So you want to grab one of your pretty fabrics and team that with one of your calico fabrics ears, and you want to put them right sides facing. So put the right side to the right side. Now this calico fabric canvas hasn't got a particular right side, so you don't have to worry, but just make sure your pretty one is the right sides facing. So that'd be pointing into the middle. Pop some pins just to hold those fabrics together. Now I'm actually going to sew on the side, or so the reverse in this case, because it's the wrong side showing, of the pretty fabric here. Now the reason I'm going to do that is because the calico fabric is much more structured and it's not going to move, it's quite flat, whereas the cotton fabric can move around when I'm sewing. So I'm going to make sure that's on the top when I put it under my sewing machine. So do the same with the other little ear. Put some pins in. And then we're going to sew around these ears. I'm going to follow a 1 centimetre seam allowance on my sewing machine. So 1 centimetre seam allowance is if you follow the edge of your sewing machine foot to the edge of your fabric with your needle in the centre, that will give you 1 centimetre. And we want to sew all the way around our little ears, up and over, but not across the bottom. We want to leave those open to turn them in the right way. So here I am at my sewing machine. You want to make sure you've got a neutral colour thread in, something that's not going to show through the seams of your bag. And now we want to sew those pieces together that we've just pinned. So I'm going to start with my little ear sections, and I'm going to be sewing around the curves, not across the top. So just around the curves on each of these ears. Take your pins out as you go. We don't want to catch them in our machine, and make sure you've got enough bobbin in your machine to keep you going for this project. So here goes, just sewing around these edges. My needle's in the middle, my fabric is lined up against the edge of my sewing machine foot here, and I'm just going to go round this curve. As you come around this bend here, if you need to, as long as your needle's down, you can just lift your foot and slightly and just turn the fabric around gradually to help you round that curve. Make sure you keep your fabric nice and flat. And don't forget to do your back stitch at the start and at the end of your sewing to lock your stitch in. And then you want to do the same with your other little ear. With our two little ear pieces is we're going to snip around the curves. The reason you want to do this on a curved bend is because when you turn it in the right way, if you don't do that, you won't be able to lay your ear or whatever you're making nice and flat. It will be all ruffled around this edge because the fabric can't expand on the inside to lay it nice and flat. So we want to just snip all the way around, not cutting into our stitches, but right up to our stitches as close as we can go. And you can either cut little notches out when you're going on an outward bend, or you can, I just normally do little snips just so that it can lay flatter. But if I show you a bit of both, you can see what I'm doing. So you can either cut little notches out like here, or you can just cut little lines so that it then has got the chance to lay flat and fan out on the inside when it's done. And you just need to go around the curve. You don't need to go worry about the straight. And you want to do that on both of your ears. So from where it starts to curve, up over. And you want to cut them about 1 centimetre apart roughly. There we are. And then you could turn your lovely little ears in the right way and check that they look okay. So it's a little bit fiddly because they're quite thin. You can use a chopstick or something to help you push the fabric up through. And then you want to press your ears so they stay nice and flat after you've done this. So use your finger to really get that nice curved bend at the top. Like so. Make sure also that you've caught all your fabric, so just double check all your seams, you haven't got any gaps or anything, and make sure they are nice and secure. So same again, so if you just turn it inside, pop your finger in and pinch some of that inner fabric, and then you can pull it through. Curve the bend out and then give them a nice press to keep them nice and flat. The other thing you could do at this point to give it a bit more definition again is you could do a top stitch all the way around the inside of your ear, about 1 centimetre in, and this will just give a sort of a little bit of definition and make that sort of inner ear that you sometimes see on a drawn bunny, or you know, anything that's got sort of a drawn ear on. I'm going to do that for you and just show you what that looks like. I'm just going to press my ears first before I do that. So I'm going to go to my ironing board. So I'm going to bring my pieces over now. So we've now got the face of our bunny bag, the reverse of our bunny bag. We've got our 2 lining fabrics, and we've got our little ears that we've also prepared already. So with my ears here, you'll see that I've done that little running stitch all the way around the inner edge. Just gives them a little bit of definition and finishes them off beautifully, and also hopefully will help them to stand upright when they're in the bag a bit easier. Okay, so on the reverse I've got my calico, and on the front there I've got my pretty fabric. So these need to be inside of our bag as we sew it all together now. So here's what you're going to need to do. So we need to put all our pieces together. So you're going to need to get a calico piece and a lining piece each, and then a pair of ears. Now the ears will go inside of the back of our bunny bag. So they're positioned on the back piece of our bunny bag, so not on this front piece. So on the front piece, what we need to do is we need to get our front face section that we've already just sewn. We need to get our lining piece of fabric, the pretty side facing down. So we've got our face and our lining fabric facing each other. And we're just going to pop a couple of pins in the top here, and we're just going to sew all the way across the top of that section of our bag. So just make sure that top section is lined up. You can use fabric clips here, or you can use pins, whatever you have in your fabric box, your sewing box. We're just going to sew all the way across here. So that's ready to sew. I'm going to pop that over next to my sewing machine. And then on our other piece, what we need to do is we need to get our back section of our bag. So this is this bit here, facing us. So the right side facing us on our table, on our workstation. And then we want to put our bunny ears onto this section, onto this bag section. Now, if we want our bunny ears to have the pretty side facing us, so unlike this bag, if you want to have your ears facing you like this, then you need to lay them onto that front section, the back side to the calico to the calico. So the back of your ears to the front of your bag, like so. And then you want to lie your pretty lining fabric face down onto all of that. So the 2 pretty sides of your lining fabric and your ears are going to be facing each other. Another point to remember when you're doing this is you don't want to put your ears too close to the outside, because we're going to be sewing around our bag, and that's going to take a good centimetre off the edge of your bag. So take a centimetre off and then line your ears up in the middle of that then measurement. So I'm going to put them roughly here. We want to leave a bit of a gap in between, and we want to line their raw edges up with the top of our bag here, the raw edges. And then we want to lay our lining fabric on top of all of that as well, and then secure with some pins or some fabric clips. Make sure you pin or fabric clip through the ear sections to hold them in place and stop them from moving. And then again, what we're going to do is we're going to sew straight across that section, holding those ears into place, just like the other piece. There we are. So I'm going to move that over to my sewing machine as well, ready to sew. Okay, so now we're at the sewing machine, and we're going to sew across the top of our bunny bags, as we've just described, where we have our pins, catching our ears in. Same on both pieces. You want to make sure you've got a neutral colour thread in your sewing machine so that your stitching doesn't show through your seams. So either a white or something to match the lightest colour of fabric that you're using. And we're just going to sew straight across the top. For seam allowance wise, I'm just going to follow my sewing machine foot along the edge of my fabric here, and that will give me a 1 centimetre seam allowance as long as my needle is positioned in the middle. Okay. So, top of my bag is positioned against the edge of my sewing machine foot here. I'm going to take my pins out as I sew. I don't want to sew over those. And I'm also going to do a back stitch when I start and a back stitch when I finish. Same on the other one. as you can see, I've caught my ears inside. Okay, so now we've sewn across the top of our 2 bag pieces. Now we want to put our bag pieces together, ready to sew all the way around the outside and connect our bag up completely. Trim off any threads that you might have from sewing. Make sure your work is nice and neat. And then you need to open those bag sections up. So you want to have your 2 lining pieces parallel to each other and your 2 outer bag sections parallel to each other. I'm going to move my ears upwards towards my outer bag section, and I'm going to do this because I want my seam on the back here to be laying down towards my lining fabric, so it just naturally then makes that happen. So my ears are now lying upwards towards my outer bag section. And then I simply want to lie one piece on top of the other, right sides facing, lining to lining, outer to outer, like so. We're going to pin all the way around our bag now to hold it together, ready for sewing, but we're going to start at this top seam section on both sides. So it's really important that you marry up the seams either side of your bag, because you're going to see that around the top of your bag section. So you want them to be nice and level each side. So simply find your seam lines, make sure they're lined up, and then you want to pop a clip, a fabric clip or a pin, whatever you've got to hand, and I'm laying my seam up towards my lining fabric. And the same the other side, lining up my seam. I'll show you with a pin. I'm going to put the pin through that seam there so it holds the seam allowance up towards my lining fabric, and then I'm just going to pop a few clips or pins around my fabric to hold it together, making sure it's nice and flat around my lining piece. And then I'm going to put a couple around the bottom of my outer bag piece as well. And then before we begin sewing all the way around the outside, I also want to consider leaving a gap that's going to be the channel for our ribbon to go through at the top of our bag either side. So there's a little gap in our sewing there where we're going to thread our ribbon through. So what you need to do to ensure that that happens is we want to make some marks on our bottom bag piece, so our outer bag fabric, on this inside here. You can use a tailor's pencil or a normal pencil. You're not going to see these markings on the finished result. And you want to mark down, I'm just going to move that clip out of the way for a second. You want to mark down from this seam line at the top where we've just sewn our outer and our lining together. You can see your stitching line. From that line, 1.5 centimetres down, make a little mark on the edge of your fabric. You want to do that the other side as well. And then you want to measure your ribbon that you're going to use, and you want to make a mark that width down from that 1.5 centimetre mark we've just made. So I'm using this really tiny thin ribbon here, so it's really narrow. So I'm just going to leave a 1 centimetre hole, and that will be absolutely plenty to allow my ribbon to pass through those 2 marks. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. So I'm going to mark 1.5 centimetre down from that stitch line, and then move my ruler down for another centimetre below that. Make sure you can see those marks either side. So I've got 2 marks this side and 2 marks this side, and I'm not going to sew in between those marks. So that 1 centimetre mark that I've put there, I'm not going to sew in between that. So when I stitch my bag now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start stitching from this bottom mark here all the way around my bag up to that bottom mark there, then stop, and then I'm going to restart stitching from my top mark here, so leaving that 1 centimetre gap open, start stitching from the top mark all the way up and round my lining. I'm going to leave a gap in the bottom of my lining here about 2 inches wide to turn my bunny bag in the right way, and I'm going to restart sewing the other side of that gap and then going back down to this top mark here. So when I've finished stitching around my bag, I should have a gap up the top to turn my bag in the right way in my lining fabric, and I should have 2 1 centimetre gaps either side at the top of my outer bag fabric. or whatever size your ribbon is, that's what size those gaps need to be. So I'm going to go to my sewing machine now and sew all the way around. Okay, so I'm back at the sewing machine now, ready to sew all the way around my bag. I'm going to start on my outer bag section down here where my face is, and I'm going to start sewing from this bottom line, this bottom notch that I've drawn myself for my little channel. So I'm just going to line that up through my foot. I can see that line. Again, I'm following my machine foot to the edge of my fabric here. That will give me my 1 centimetre seam allowance, and I'm going to sew all the way around this bottom section up to the other side where I've made that bottom mark. Doing a back stitch when we begin and when we finish. So I'm slowly coming up to this bottom mark now, watching it through my foot, and when my needle hits it, I'm then going to do my back stitch and take the bag off of my machine. Trimming off your threads as you go. So now I'm just going to take this side clip out, holding it all in place. Moving my machine up to the top notch now that I've drawn, so leaving that 1 centimetre gap and going round again the same, and remembering to stop and leave a gap at the bottom. Do a back stitch here when you stop to leave your gap. Move your needle along. So I've now left a gap in this bottom bit. Back stitch again. Pins out. As we come back up to this seam now, make sure our seam allowance lays nice and flat, top and bottom. So I've got it lying up towards my lining fabric. And we want to remember to stop when we hit that top notch again that we've marked. And trim off our threads. So we should have now 2 little gaps either side of the outer fabric at the top of our bunny bag, ready for our ribbon, and we should have left ourselves a gap at the bottom of our lining fabric to turn our bag in the right way. Before we do that though, because we've got a curved edge to our bag and we want it to lay nice and flat when it's turned in the right way, we're just going to snip some little notches all the way around the curved area of our bag, lining and outer, just to give it a nice flat feel when we turn it in the right way. It makes the fabric easier to get that nice finish. And on the lining part, we just need to do it where we've stitched, where we have the opening, we don't need to worry. And now we're ready to turn our bag in the right way. Okay, so now we've sewn all the way around the outside of our bunny bag. We've snipped around the curves, we've left our gaps and our opening down here, trimmed off our loose threads so it's nice and neat. Now we're ready to turn our bag in the right way. So to do that, you just go through the opening you've left and you want to bring your bag all the way up through that opening. Again, at this point, you could give your bag a nice press, and you want to get your hand into your bag and then ease out your seams to get that nice curve along the bottom of your bag, like so. We also, at this point, want to close up this gap here now on our sewing machine. So you just want to tuck this open seam in. It doesn't have to be exactly curved, it's going to be at the bottom of our bag. You just want to bend that in, curl that in, pop a clip or a pin on there, and then you just want to sew that closed on your sewing machine. So we're simply just going to sew straight across that little gap on our sewing machine. There we are, I've just done that on my sewing machine now. So I've literally just done a little straight stitch along that opening there to close it shut. And then we want to tuck our lining down into our outer bag fabric. So grab your lining and just push that into your bag fabric, into your outer bag fabric. Getting that right to the bottom there. Lining up the top so it's nice and flush. You can give your bag a press again now. So you can see now my ears are facing outwards towards my face. You can see my pretty floral fabrics. And next what we want to do is we want to sew a little channel in this top bit so that our ribbon stays in that top section. So as you can see on my bag here, I've got a little stitch line all the way around the bag underneath where my ribbon is going to be threaded through. So you should also have your little holes in there ready for your ribbon to go through. So if I just pop my needle in there, you can see there's a little hole there for my ribbon, and also the other side. So when you're sewing your channel all the way around the top of your bag now, it needs to be below that gap. So to get that right, what you can do is you could just put a tiny little mark, measure down. So we did 1.5 centimetres down and then another centimetre to the bottom of my gap. So just remembering what your measurements were. So I'm going to measure down 3 centimetres and make a little mark, and that's where I'm going to sew. So I'm going to put a little pin in there, in fact, just through the top layer of my fabric. So 3 centimetres down. I'm just going to mark that with pins, and that will give me a guide of where to follow with my sewing machine. And the same on the reverse, so just from the top of my fabric here from the seam, 3 centimetres down, popping a little pin. If you do draw a line on this, just remember you're going to be able to see that. So use an invisible pen, a vanishing pen if you've got one, or just use your pins like this to guide you. Okay, so I've now measured 3 centimetres down. I haven't joined my bag together, so I've done 2 on the front and 2 on the back. And that's what I'm now going to follow, and I'm going to stitch all the way around the top of my bag. So this can be a bit tricky because we need to get our sewing machine kind of in our bag to stitch around and follow that line. So what's worth doing, we always want to do our top stitching on the side that we're going to see, so on the outside of our bag. So I'm just going to turn my bag back in the wrong way now, like so, and then I'm going to lay my bag on my sewing machine like this, and I'm going to stitch from the inside round. What you can also do, if you're able, if your bag is big enough, you can take off the front section of your sewing machine if you're able, near where your needle is, and you can slide your bag on and then feed it round. But you might not have enough room because the bag's a little bit diddy. Okay, so I'm back to my sewing machine now to sew this channel around my bunny bag. So like I was saying, you may be able to pull off that front section of your sewing machine to make it narrower, and if your bag is able to fit around that section, you could do this to help you sew around the top of your bag. But if it won't fit over where your bag is quite small, then we're going to need to sew from the inside like I need to do on mine. So I'm going to pop that back on a moment, move my threads out the way. So I'm just going to be really careful, keep my ears out the way, and I just want to kind of move that top fabric back so I can see my pins, and I want to lay my needle and my foot inside of this fabric. So I'm inside of my bunny bag here. So my foot is positioned inside, and then I'm going to take those pins out as I go and just follow the top of that bag around as straight as I can get it, doing a back stitch when I start, and then going all the way around, trying to keep it nice and level. You can also follow something on your sewing machine. If you can't see the seam allowances, this is much too far in, you could pop some tape down there or an elastic band around your machine or something, just to give you a guide of what to follow. Turn your bag around gradually as you go, trying to follow those pins. And you want to go all the way around the top of your bag. So this is the fiddliest bit. those ears so we don't sew them in. And then as you come round to where you started, you want to try and line up those stitches to meet together. And then just do a little back stitch at the end. And then trim off your threads. So, inside and out. And then just make sure you've gone all the way around the top of your bag. So you can see my stitch line there, all the way around the top. This is my lining fabric. I've met back up in the middle there. You could turn your bag in now the right way. And just check your stitching again. So you can hardly see my stitching because it's a white on this nice creamy fabric, so it blends in really, really well. And that gives us our little channel for our ribbon to be threaded through. So we've almost finished. We've now done all of our stitching on our machine for our lovely little bunny bags. All that's left to do now is to thread our ribbon through our bag to make our drawstring. So you want to get your chosen ribbon. I wouldn't cut it off if you've got it a long length until it's threaded through. And you want to get something to help you thread your ribbon through this little channel. Now if you're lucky enough to have a bodkin, then these are really great for threading ribbon, elastic, anything that's wider through something. And what you do is you thread it through the big eye there, and then you drag it down the needle. The needle is split all the way down, and that holds your ribbon in the needle as it pulls through. If not, you can use a safety pin and just tie it onto the safety pin, or put the safety pin through your ribbon if it's thick enough. Just find something that's going to work for you. So I'm going to put it through my bodkin, and then I'm going to thread this all the way through my little bunny bag. So I'm going in one side here, and I don't want to come out the other side. I want to go all the way around. So ignoring the hole this side, all the way around our bunny bag, till we reach the hole where we've just come in, and then we want to poke it back out. So you want to find that hole again. It can be a bit tricky, and get your ribbon back out and pull it out, and give yourself enough coming out that you can tie a little knot in. So I'm going to cut that off. Let's grab my scissors. And then I'm going to do the same again, but going in from the other side. So I'm just going to tie a knot on these two lengths to keep them from coming out. So I'm just going to tie a knot on the end here, like so. And then I'm going to go back in again with my ribbon from this side all the way around. So then I've got two ribbons, one hanging out on the left and one hanging out on the right. And then threading in from the other side. So again, all the way around. Coming out this other side, finding the gap, like so. Oops. Okay, take my bodkin out, and then I'm going to trim off this side as well. So I don't need all of that, so I'm just going to make this a bit shorter. And then you can now measure your two sides to get them the same. So to get them roughly the same length. Remember, you're going to be tying a knot, so that's going to take a bit of that length off. So let's just tie a knot in this side as well. Just going to tie a double knot so it doesn't come undone. And that will give you your drawstring. So I'm just going to cut off these extra little bits here. So 1 and 2. They're roughly the same length. One's maybe a little bit shorter. There you go. And then when you pull the two sides, that will bring your bunny bag together. Ta-da! And then you have finished, completed your gorgeous little drawstring bunny bag, perfect for putting some little Easter treats in, for Easter eggs or a little gift or something to give to your favourite person. And if you want to adapt your bag even further, the other thing you could do is just sew a little thin handle all the way over to the top of your bag here, just above your drawstring, and that will make a really cute little crossbody bag for your favourite little person to collect all their yummy gifts and Easter eggs in. Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I can't wait to see you have a go and make your bunny bag. And please remember to share what you're making. If you're part of my social sewing community group on Facebook, that would be amazing. Share your sewing in there. I will pop the link in the comments here. Or if you're watching this from my social sewing community group, then remember to share your pictures. And if you're watching this on YouTube, pop me a comment and let me know how you got on. Or share me a picture as well. And remember to give me a thumbs up to say you like my video.